in place for all law enforcement. So all law enforcement has to go through. What's interesting is about the part-time on our side of the aisle, if you will, is that the part-timer has to come off that list. And so what part-timer that's 24, 25 years old wants to take a part-time job, he will in order to get a full-time job. But we also have the opportunity to get folks that recently retired, that they can bring that experience if you have a young agency. And that's a benefit that we see at the Sheriff's Office. And we don't have many, because not many are going to come back after leaving, after retiring. Interesting about the way law enforcement is, remember I said I made $19,000 a year when I first started? Well, everybody had second jobs back then. And that's how law enforcement actually still mingled with a lot of folks, whether you were a school bus driver and a police officer, or you build houses and a police officer. You still got out there and dealt with the public in a different way than you do now, because now it's a career and you really don't have time for anything else with all the training that you have to do in order to maintain the accreditation for an agency. And so, they are better paying jobs than they were, careers that they were back then. The only difference is that the benefits aren't the same, and that's what the difference is between today and yesteryear.
So the hijack, you mentioned the benefits. I have to tell you a quick, somewhat funny story about my father and old school Italian thinking. We were building an addition on a house in Hurley at the time. So we were pouring cement. I had just become a police officer. I didn't start the academy, but one of the benefits that we got was that we had days. You would earn days. You'd get vacation days essentially, but so a small bank of them, 5 days I think it was. And for the first year, and it kind of carried you through in emergencies. You can get officers to work for you. But so we're pouring the cement. It's 2 o'clock. He looks at me. He said, "Hey, you got to go to work, right? You got to go." And I worked the afternoon shift, and he said. I said, "Actually, no, Pop, we're good. We can keep going. I took the day off." No, don't get in trouble. You got to go to work, right? Go change. And I would come down to headquarters, shower, get my uniform on, and work until 11:30 or 12 o'clock. And again, young man's game, right? So I said, "No, listen, I'm good." "What do you mean?" I said, I took a vacation day." "What does he mean, a vacation day?" I said, "It means that's what he would, and all the Italian guys said, "No, I took the day off, and the department's got it. They're going to pay me." "What? Come on, you're going to get in trouble." I said, "I'm not going to get in trouble." He said, "Okay." So we kept working, right? End of the day, no problem. Every 2 weeks, we'd settle up what he owed me, because I didn't work for free. I love him, but come on. So we're sitting in the office, he's counting it out, and he counts out the money, and he goes, "Okay, here you go." I go, oh, hold on a second. I said, I think you're short a day." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, I went through the calendar with him. I said, "Oh, right here, this is the day. You got to pay me for this day." "What?" I go, "Yeah, this is the day we poured the cement." He goes, "Yeah." I go, "What?" He goes, "The police department paid me." I go, no, that's not how it worked. No, I took the day off, but no, they pay you. You take the vacation day, take the money. He goes, "And next Tuesday, take another vacation day." Smart Italian guy. I said, "Nah, I get it. You got me once."
That's good. That's good.
Thank you. Maya.
Thank you. This is for Chief Tinti. You had mentioned earlier that you had used data points to help create speed limits for certain areas. What other data points do you collect? Who analyzes them? And what other changes are made based on those?
So another incredible change in law enforcement is the use of crime analysis, right? I know you have a crime analyst down there. We have one. Ours is funded through a GRIV grant. The state provides a part-time analyst. She works out of the Finn Institute out of Albany in conjunction with the Albany PD and whatnot. So they look at everything. And when I say everything, it's any conceivable data we can provide to her. We've had, most of it is the crime, right? Where do we, and essentially what we're looking for, old school, was cops on dots. That was the response. So we would say, well, here's where the activity is. This makes the most sense to put the police officers there. Let them essentially work out of this area, and if they need an errant call here or there, they'll go out, handle it, and come back. Today, that's not entirely true. The new standard out there is evidence-based policing, where there's still crime analysis and its use, but it expands it to include more things. You know, about the quality of life issues, not just the calls for service, not just, you know, what's related to crime itself or what criminal activity is, but certainly where the public needs us to be, whether they're community events. And so when you look at data points, speed issues are one. You know, traffic accidents, that's a big factor. You know, anytime we have a visible presence, and essentially, you know, if you boil the two things down, you have motive and opportunity, right? And essentially, that's what comes down to a crime, right? If somebody has a motive, I'm going to hit this person over the head, and oh, there's the person, and I have a bat in my hand, right? The crime most likely will happen. But if you reduce the opportunity for that crime to happen by a visible presence, right? If there's a cop on every corner, and the person turns the corner, even if they have a bat in their hand, and they see the guy they're gonna hit, and they turn and they see Officer Smiley there, they're gonna say, hey, what's up? And they're gonna walk away, right? Most likely. Or they're gonna hit Officer Smiley in the head, I don't know, one of the things. But my point is that, so what we try to do is effectively put the police officer presence in areas where the analyst is saying, you know what? This is maybe what you should do. And most recently, one of the things that has come out, and we're looking to explore the possibility of kind of using this information, is that before it was a standard, you know, gotta have a cop here all the time, right? The physical, visual presence of a police officer. Statistically now, that's not really what's out there. 15 to 30 minutes randomly throughout the day is enough to deter crime. And it has effectively been seen all over the country in certain projects and research programs that have said, well, you don't have to have a cop on that corner for 8 hours. You can have a cop there for 20 minutes here, 11 minutes here, 18 minutes here, and it will effectively keep the opportunity for crime in that neighborhood reduced. We'll see. So every year, my staff and I, we go up to the GIVE symposium up in Albany. 600 law enforcement personnel, professionals are up there, probation, parole, you know, sheriff's deputies, cops, all over, troopers are up there, everybody's up there, and there's a wealth of information, there's breakout sessions, and there's a lot of discussion on programs, not just local or programs within the state, programs throughout the country that have had success in changing how cops respond. Little things like driving down the street and putting your overhead lights on, once in a while, randomly, right? And people will say, well, what does that do? Well, it's a visible deterrent, right? But again, you can't do it all the time because people will get used to it, and so you gotta kind of use that information, right? For years, the cops, especially in the city environment, had to go call to call to call to call. So when I came on, the old timers were telling me stories about them walking and pulling the call box. Every so often they'd hit the corner, pull the call box, check in with the sergeant at the desk, and that's the way things were. That's it. Then you have to have a rapid response. So we put cops in the cars. Now the public said, well, I don't see a cop on the street anymore. No one's walking. And that's one of the things that I hear frequently is, boy, we'd really like to see cops on the bikes, walking patrol. And it's a challenge because we got to balance with the response for the calls for service as well. We've had success with bike patrols, and so when you talk about crime analysis and putting the cops out there, it's more than just the traffic anymore. It's more than the criminal activity. It's the calls for service, right? Crime is down. Thankfully, reported violent crime is down. But the calls for service is still high. People still require police services, and as the sheriff mentions, the job responsibilities or the expectations of the police officers has changed. You know, you're right. When we showed up to a scene and someone is experiencing an overdose and there's drugs, somebody's getting cuffed. That's not the response that we have today. Hold on a second, somebody needs help, right? That's
right.
That's what we have to do.
That's right.
But it's a change because, as I mentioned before, you have officers that have that thinking in their mind going, oh, there's drugs, where's cuffs? And that's not the response that we can have today. It's not working. The system's not working.
And like the chief said, it's about patterns and having a proactive approach to law enforcement. But it's in conjunction with the community that we serve, because we cannot do what we do without the assistance of the community. It just doesn't work. When a crime occurs, we need the community to let us know, what happened and how it happened, so we can, react to it and fix the problem. Because if we don't know what the issues and the problems are, we're not going to be able to help. And so that building that trust is huge. right now, especially in today's world of law enforcement.
And the one thing that has changed, again, going back to what the sheriff said about technology, when an incident occurred in 1994, it wouldn't be reported in the paper. Think about this, for those of you old enough to remember, until the following day. Today, it's live streamed. And there are instances where it's so live streamed, it's happening before the cops get there. The 911 call goes in, the phones are out, it's on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Snapchat, whatever it might be, quicker than the cops can respond. So think about, one, the evidentiary value that's collected by these phones. That's a huge asset for us. But on the back end of it, you think about, like, I get the call, the other day, we had the shooting. It was awful, and there was a time delay in my notification, and then once I got back to the office and we started looking, I'm thinking, wow, look at all the people that knew before me, right? And it just happens. That's just, right? One text message you can send out text today to half the world, right? In a second. So again, an advantage for us in law enforcement to some degree, and in other cases, a challenge.
Just quickly, for data, I was wondering if you guys end up, or this might be new, but in terms of collecting data on mental health in particular communities, is there some information that is new in terms of what you're gathering and providing to the county or to social services?
So for us, overdoses is an incredible, it really is it's overwhelming. The epidemic that we're experiencing now is overwhelming. And for us, things that we haven't done before was that reporting part of it. Kingston Fire, we're lucky as an agency here that Kingston Fire will respond at the same time the cops are, right? We might be driving around patrol, but within the firehouse layout that's in the city, their response is amazing. It really is, right? They're up and out and they're gone. And they're there at the scene. So when a police officer gets there, they're really more of, providing security, trying to deal with the family. And then we submit now, at the time, an overdose report that goes to, I believe from our perspective, from the county DA's office. So they get the overdose report, and that information gets shared and done whatever, I think more for, follow-up than we do on our end of it. But that was something we haven't done before. And I think that the sheriff's office puts out a report now that shows where everything is going, what overdose, where, fatal, non-fatal, that type of thing.
So we have an overdose mapping system. We have what's called someone from HIDA. It's a high intensity drug trafficking area that the federal government paid for this analyst to work at the sheriff's office. So we gather this information. Even though the information is good, it's not as accurate as it can be. For example, if you're in the southern part of the county and you overdose, you may end up going to St. Luke's Hospital or Vassar Brothers or St. Francis. Even if you're in the western part of the county, you're going to Margaretville Hospital. You're not going to come down here to the city of Kingston. Even some folks here, they rather go to Northern Dutchess. And so the numbers are, although they're better, they aren't as accurate as we would like. One of the things that phase 2 of my opioid response as county law enforcement oracle that we rolled out is that's going to start pretty soon. The number's already out. It's a 1-800 number, so family, friends can call within 72 hours of an overdose, and we're going to send a team out there, and that team's going to be a mental health expert, a peer advocate, and a plainclothes police officer. And the purpose of that team is to try and get that individual to rehab and to help the family, because the family is also worried about the stigma that comes with having a loved one that has an issue with drugs. And so this team's going to go out and they're going to go ahead and try and get help to that, and that's anywhere in the county, to that individual within 72 hours, because that's the weakest point when someone realizes, like, oh my God, I almost died of an overdose, and try to get the individual to the rehab. We're also going to document where it occurred. And to see if there's a pattern in that neighborhood. Because as you know, it's also our job to get that stuff off the streets, especially if it's fentanyl. And we've seen a big resurgence of that here lately in the county, and it's not good. And so when something like that happens, we in law enforcement have to take an active role in locating who the dealers are to get the stuff off the street. But we really have to partner with the community. And again, being in the narcotics field for over 2 decades, I can tell you that helping someone, they give you more information than someone that you arrest in certain instances. And really, in reality, it really is about getting the stuff off the street. But it's also, in today's, we have to do something, because what we have been doing hasn't really been working. So getting the individual to a rehab and supporting that family and showing them who to call is important, because it's going to break down that barrier of them being afraid to call us in law enforcement. And that's why it's important when we show up to the scene not to arrest anybody. It is important. There's these stories that I hear, a Lazarus party. Has anybody heard of that? Lazarus party? They all get together, and one guy has a bunch of Narcan, and they all overdose, and then one guy goes around, and this is what's going on.
It's like a designated
It's
Narcan guy,
it's
yeah, like
incredible.
designated driver.
It's
He's-
incredible that they're playing Russian roulette with their lives, and not being concerned about what effect they're going to have to their families. And so it's we don't want them to get up and leave the person. We want them to call, because we want to save that person's life. And they say it takes 7 or 8 times to get somebody to realize that they need to stop before they kill themselves. And so we're going to do what we can in law enforcement, not only to help those individuals, but we got to get the stuff off the street too. And that includes whether, and we're not talking about someone who actually, is on an opioid for a particular reason. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people that are abusing it. We're talking about doctors that are doing all these prescriptions that may be illegal. And those are the things that we're looking at in law enforcement. And it all goes back to patterns.
I mean, this is totally separate topic, and I'm a little surprised by the Lazarus party. I mean, is that like just in case, or they're purposefully overdosing?
It could be either or, actually. They have these kids. We had the Oracle trailer up at the county fair, and a kid came over with a kit that shows him the level of fentanyl in his heroin. They have kits that do that. It's amazing. And so, people that abuse that way obviously don't realize what they're doing to themselves or their families. And so again, our job is to, let them recognize what you're doing is, it's not good. Not only for you, you're looking to kill yourself, but, your family and what it means to, is this something that happens every day? No, but these are some stories that we in law enforcement hear. And it's amazing. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or not. I would hope not. But these are some of the stories that we're hearing.
Well, I thank you to the Kingston Library for hosting this, and thank you both so much for being here. It's a really great opportunity to get to talk to you and to ask questions about what you do. And thanks to Joe for giving up the mic, because I have like 10 questions myself.
Oh,
but I
boy.
wonder if I could just ask each of you a specific question, if that's okay. So, Juan, you were talking about being new to office. It's the 1-year anniversary of your election. Can you talk a little bit about any kind of changes that you've made? I mean, I imagine that your style of leadership is different than your predecessors, and yet many probably of the same people are still in the office. So how have you kind of navigated the shift in leadership, and what sort of changes have you made in that way?
Well, as you know, civil service kind of ties my hand on any particular type of movements, but I will tell you that I'm blessed and very lucky with the men and women at the Ulster County Sheriff's Office. These are the true professionals that I deal with. And the Sheriff's Office has been around a lot longer than the state police. They were called Shouts in 1661. And I know this because I go around and I look at the pictures that are on the walls of the previous sheriffs and how lucky I am to represent the people of this county for this office. There have been numerous changes that I put in place. And whenever you have a new administration, there are going to be changes. I was lucky enough to have some folks that retired, and that opened up some movement within the ranks. And I think we have a new first sergeant, a new training sergeant, a new detective lieutenant, the first female detective sergeant supervisor in the history of the criminal division. We also have a new superintendent of jails, and he's the first African American superintendent of jails. Not because she was a female or not because he was an African American, but because they actually qualified and have the what it takes to do that job. And when it comes to the detective sergeant, she was number one on the list. I just happened to be the sheriff. But it's great to see that, though, and it is good to see movement and change within an organization. And this is not like the New York State Police where you can go anywhere in the state. It's a sheriff's office. There are a lot of folks that work together for 20, 25 years. One of the biggest challenges I had was hearing, well, this is the way it's always been. It would drive me crazy. I'm like, well, it's not going to be that way now. And so these changes have been gradual. I was mindful of the leadership of the previous administration. I respect the former sheriff and everything that he's done to bring this organization to where it is. And I recognize some of the things that were in place that need to be adjusted, but he did a tremendous job, and he gave 42 years of his life to the people in this county. And then whenever I see him, because I do invite him to certain events that involve some of the people that work for him, because I find it very important to make sure that all politics aside, that this is an organization rich in history, and this county is very lucky to have the men and women at this office. A lot of policy changes. I'm presently sending someone to get equal employment opportunity officer that's getting trained in New York City. He's going to come up and we're going to set a policy in place as soon as he gets back, and we've already been working on that. The changes of policy involving how we deal with undocumented individuals, and that's well documented. It was publicized. And did I put it out there on day one? No, I didn't. I did it gradually. I moved people in place gradually. First of all, it was January 1st. It's New Year's Day. I know people pay mortgages. I know they have to pay heat in the winter. I didn't come in with an agenda to bring folks from other organizations in. That's not what I did. What I did was I assessed, and I told those that within 90 days I'll make the changes, because then it'll be the springtime, and those changes will occur then. And that's exactly what I did. And I assessed. I'm pretty humbled because I know what a tremendous opportunity this is for me, especially being the first Puerto Rican American elected to sheriff in New York State history. And by the way, I didn't know that beforehand. I knew that because the Sheriff's Association told me that when they came down here to visit. But that's not even going to get me a cup of coffee. But that's okay. But it
I'll buy a cup. I'll buy a cup of coffee. Sorry.
But it really is a tremendous honor, and sure, there's been policy changes, and there have been again the Oracle, our response to the opioid epidemic is, and the help of the county executive and the county Department of Health and local law enforcement has been absolutely astonishing. And so I have it's been a big roller coaster ride. There's lows and there highs, but it's a lot of fun.
Thanks for that glimpse into your leadership style. Appreciate it. And then Chief Tinti, so there was legislation recently introduced to the Common Council by activists in the city of Kingston requesting that changes be made to the police commission. in particular, the appointment process and questions about whether or not the police chief should be the secretary of the police commission, as well as, ideas for changing the complaint process to make it a more equitable process. Are there any changes to the police commission that you would support or would like to see?
So, I'm not elected. My position on any type of legislative changes within the commission makeup, for me, I've always worked within the confines of what the city charter sets. So, that's a tough question. I believe the chief does have a role within the commission. As secretary, I don't have a vote. Anytime the commission meets and has topics of discussion, which have been, over the past few years, very hard topics to discuss. Transparency, accountability, it's difficult. And there are certain provisions within the law that make open air discussions not possible, right? When we go into executive session to talk about personnel matters, and most of them disciplinary, when we come out of executive session and the mayor and the commissioners are there and they're asked questions, they can't really talk about what was discussed there. And as you've seen over the course of the last couple of years, that has been very difficult, right? I know Mayor Noble has tried to kind of put that information out, but his hands are tied effectively. He can't do that. So, but to get back to what you're saying, the commission, the charter, the city charter would have to be changed in order for that to be made up. I think the chief should have a role in the commission. If it's not secretary, which again, that's, I just take the notes. That's what I do during those meetings. But I am there to answer any questions as far as the operations go, and I think that's important. I think that's an important role.
Well, they're talking at the state level about potentially repealing 50A. Is that something that you would see as something you could support?
So I'm not really sure, like, there's been a lot of discussion about that. I'm trying to follow on social media what that really... So Civil Service 50A essentially is a provision in the law within the statute that says that, I think it applies to all first responders, EMS, not just police, corrections, I believe, that their disciplinary background, and I'll kind of use that because that's just the main focus of it, isn't really out for public view. Anything that's within a personnel file that is of a disciplinary nature remains confidential. Can be reviewed by commissions, can be reviewed for, by judges or attorneys for purposes of whatever they may need it for, but essentially it can't be out in the public. And that has raised a lot of concerns. Well, how was that officer disciplined? You say the officer was disciplined, but what does that mean, right? And that can't be shared. And there is a frustration. I see a lot of the change coming out of some things that have happened in New York City. That really is like the forefront. When you got 38,000 cops, I think, right down there, that's tough. And, again, with us in Kingston and a lot of the local areas, I don't believe any place else has a police commission makeup. They use a town board or a police board type of makeup, but with us it is somewhat difficult, and our commission meets once a month. For those that aren't familiar with the makeup, it's the mayor and 4 appointed individuals and myself as a secretary. We go over and review hire, fire, discipline, and promote, essentially is what it is. We review certain policies. Right now, as I mentioned before, we're kind of going through a Lexapol remake on these to make sure that we're in coordination with a lot of the federal and state statutes, accreditation standards. And then on top of that, anytime there's any matter that needs to be brought to the commission, we explore that. So most recently, over the last 3 years, Mayor Noble, as part of the commission, has said that any use of force incident, and again, I'll say this as a good thing, will be reviewed internally first. We're not waiting. In the past, we've always waited for a complaint to come in and say, oh, I think the officer was this, or I think the officer did that wrong, or that's not the case. Now what we're doing is, as soon as there is any use of force, the deputy chief collects all the information, the body cams, all the files, whatever it may be, and then presents a finding on his, he'll say that it was proper, within policy, whatever, and that record then gets to the commission that they will review as well. And they'll make a determination within the commission's boundaries to say, we feel that, that officer conducted themselves professionally, or we suggest additional training or counseling or discipline or whatever it might be, that helps, as the sheriff mentioned, keep the police department professional. because that's really what we've got to look at. We have certain guidelines we have to abide by. So 50A is really out there, and I know there's been a lot of talk about repealing 50A or certain sections of 50A. That's something certainly for the legislative branch to consider. I think that's a big part.
I'm sorry, did you just say that that any use of force is reviewed by the police commission as well as internally, or only if internally it is deemed that it might, without a complaint?
No, I'll use it for instance, and I say any use of force, that's not necessarily true. If an officer puts hands on to put cuffs on, that's not investigated. But if there's a injury to either the officer or the defendant, the suspect, taser deployment, OC deployment, baton, obviously those are the ones that, if there's, like I said, injury, those are the ones that are investigated. So any officer at the scene, we collect the body cam footage, the file's prepared, any report that's submitted, prepared, and then we look at what we have as evidence. If there's any witnesses at the scene, he'll interview them and prepare a file, and then that file, I say almost immediately, it takes a day or two to get it all together, will be sent to the commission for their review as well. And at the meetings in executive session, we'll go through them and say, okay, and they'll kind of look at each one individually. But they do review each one, yes, that's correct. Yeah. And again now, right, it's very ahead of what people have been trying to do. Now we're not waiting for the complaint to come in. And I think that was very, very progressive of Mayor Noble to put that into place ahead of time. And it has, I think the use of the body cameras, I think the new policy, a review the use of force, I think, with us, the right to know was another policy that he enacted, which kind of really put us out there. Now an officer essentially, to the best of their ability at the time, short of exigent circumstances, is to make sure that the person knows why they're being stopped and who we are, Kingston Police, Officer Tinti, business card if there's no other record available. And I think that really helps to build that accountability within the community that we've all been striving for, so, yeah.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here this evening. I'm sure you'd rather be home with your families right now. I have two quick questions for the both of you. What is your policy on reporting home invasions and car break-ins? And have you noticed an increase in any of these? And Golden Hill Drive is in the city of Kingston. However, it's maintained by the County of Ulster, so who actually has the jurisdiction of issuing tickets for the speeders?
That'd be both, because it is in the city of Kingston, but it's county-owned property, but it's in the city, so both have jurisdiction to write tickets. What was your first question? Reference to break-ins? Well, obviously, somebody calls up. If it's a home invasion burglary, we send patrols out. Then you dial 911, it's going to be the nearest car, whether it's the state police, the sheriff's office. We have seen an increase in car break-ins, mainly when people park their cars and go on hikes. And what happens is folks are leaving, items like your Garmin in public view, and it just gives somebody an opportunity to break into the car. People also leave their cars unlocked. Actually, I just had one today. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, it drives me nuts. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the front page of people go, lock your car.
People don't lock their cars. Yes, including my members. They don't lock their cars, and especially if you parked in your home and you live in a rural area, you must lock your cars and lock your doors. That's the easiest way. You stop at a store, a local general store in a local neighborhood, and you leave the car open because you're just going to run in and get a cup of coffee. That's a perfect opportunity for someone who's waiting in the woods to run into your car, grab your Garmin, grab your wallet, grab your purse, and they're back into the woods and they're gone like that. So it's important to lock. I know we live in the country, especially if you're out in Shandaken or you live in a nice area of the city of Kingston and you're used to leaving your car open. You have to lock up your car. You have to close your doors when you come in and out of your home. And it happens on a daily basis. But there has been an uptick in car break-ins. And again, because people leave their cars open. And it's easy, and you walk in, the individuals that, remember, there's a lot of folks out there that have habits, and they need to support their habits, and you're just making it easy for them to leave the car unlocked, or to put your GPS Garmin or your phone on your dashboard. You're just inviting someone to break into your car.
In Kingston, we have the same thing, whether it's you mentioned about a home invasion. Really, I think it's more of a burglary, right, is what we're looking at, or a car larceny. And there are crimes of opportunity, going back to what I talked about with motive and opportunity, they're crimes of opportunity. So, a bad guy is walking down the street and they're pulling door handles, right, jiggling the door handle. Well, the opportunity's there if it goes pop, right? And we don't get a lot of actual crash to glass kind of break-ins. We don't have many, if at all. But think about, right, I look in the back seat and there's a brand new Mac computer in the back seat that's worth $800, $900. And I'm doing this. I could reach in and grab that thing, smack that glass, and I'm out of here in 10 seconds. So again, what we tell people is lock your cars, but also store your valuables, because those two things work in conjunction, right? Even if you're not going to bring it in the house, put it in the trunk, throw a blanket over it, because we are looking at crimes of opportunity. So as they're walking down, they're pulling the handles, and if you look, we've tried to post it on our Facebook page as much as we can as an alert, but we have video of residents in Kingston that have come out, or the cameras have triggered, and they see someone pulling on the door handle and moving to the next car. We have kids, and I'll say kids, young adults that are out there pulling on door handles and reaching in and grabbing change outside of the little coffee cup holder in the center console. There was one that did it just for gags. It really was, where this group of young individuals went around and switched registrations and, the scented mirror hangers on cars just to kind of mess with people in their neighborhood, right? And they did take some change. But so that, again, going back, it's a crime of opportunity. Has it been an uptick? Yes, it has. And for us, it's cyclic. We'll see a drop, it'll hold level, and then all of a sudden it goes up, and it's usually a group of individuals. One individual will usually check to see who's been out, or, a name will pop up. Someone will say, hey, that's unusual that it happens in this area. You should check on, and with us, we've had great success with our TipSoft program. It's an application. I believe you have it as well. A lot of the agencies now use it, where you can report information to the police department, non-emergency information, through anonymous means, whether it's through your phone, whether it's through a computer. It really helps. The texting capability helps. We encourage its use. We try to put it out on every announcement we do, because it really is a way that the community, residents, can communicate with the police department without having to do a face-to-face. And I know that there's been discussions about trust issues and transparency, but here's one opportunity where you can take your phone, download that app, send a text message. And it's funny, the ones that we usually get the most are the jaded, scorned lovers that want to turn in their boyfriends or girlfriends or partners or whatever, and you can attach pictures, and you better check him out. He carries drugs in his glove box. Here's the car number, and he should never have left me. He loves somebody else, that kind of thing. I don't mean to make it funny, but that's what we look at. And so we'll get sometimes these messages, and it goes to all the supervisors. So as soon as we get the tip, whoever's working, it is funny sometimes. My deputy chief will go, did you read that? I'm like, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, she's really mad.
And when would you share information? What type of case do you communicate with each other?
We do. We communicate all the time. When the city recently had the homicide, they put out a request, and a lot of the local agencies responded, and we work collaboratively on we help, because all his folks were occupied with this. It's a homicide, it's a big case. So we had the other agencies, including our office, involved in taking calls, for example, for the rest of the citizens in the city of Kingston. And so we collaborate, and we put information out amongst each other. We have a weekly meeting with members of KPD at the office in regards to anything that's going on, locally. There's also a monthly meeting of the Ulster County Chiefs that the first meeting's at 9 a.m. with the superintendent of schools, then the next meeting's at 10 a.m. with the chiefs, and that happens once a month, and we talk about issues that may be going on throughout the county. But we work hand in hand because we have to. There are different assets that we need that we don't have, that perhaps KPD may have, or the state police may have. And so it's a collaborative effort by law enforcement because it really is needed today.
That wasn't always the case. When I came on 92, if a sheriff's deputy or the town of Ulster entered the city of Kingston, we were to get behind that car and follow it until it left the city.
That was troopers too, by the way. I remember that.
It was that siloed. Law enforcement had that siloed approach.
It was more competitive, more than cooperative now, the sheriff.
I tell you, it was unbelievable. Like, and if at the time, if the administration found out that because again, on the street level, you'd go, hey, you're okay? All right, have a good night, be safe, right? But sometimes from the political level at the time, it was just awful to work. Like, you're like, listen, bro, you got to leave. You got to get out, right?
That's changed.
It has absolutely changed. There's no doubt in my mind that it is the best it's ever been. When we talk about like a scene where the resources now that we rely on, the other day, how many investigators do you have?
I have 5 detectives.
Yeah, so just the neighborhood canvases that had to be done, and again, time is of the essence, right? When we have an incident like there was the other night where there's a shooting, you have witnesses, you have physical evidence. Those are the things that have to be collected or interviewed immediately. Immediately.
And we come in and we're part of his team. We become part of his team.
Absolutely.
Yep. He tells us what we need and what he needs, and we go out and help him because that's what it's all about.
We still have the water line that, you mentioned about the drone going up in the air. These are all things, and not just to the sheriff's office as well, but the other day, Kingston Fire Department, they rolled their trucks and they lit up the entire block with the lighting that they have on these vehicles, and so it has to be that way.
And that's a great point.
Oh,
The
it was
fire
unbelievable.
departments are huge, and the volunteer fire departments in the towns, they're huge when it comes to assisting law enforcement, especially in a case like they had here in the city of Kingston.
Daylight, it was daylight. The new truck that he just got, I told Chief Brown, that is absolutely amazing, worth every penny. Don't know what you paid, but it was worth every penny. I know what he paid.
Okay, hi, and again, thank you both for coming to our Kingston Library and for your service as well. Sheriff Figueroa, I have a question for you. You mentioned about your program for the drugs. Isn't there a program in place for inmates that come into the facility where they get their methadone, they have mental health in there to help them do changes, there's an educational program, and you said your program will help them before they get to the jail, and you said they might repeat this process at least 8 times. How many times are you going to allow, not you personally, but how many times is your program funded for these repeat offenders to continue, and then where your money could be used towards the children to prevent them from even getting to that point?
Well, it's a multi-pronged approach. We put in for a grant, and then we didn't get it this year, but we're probably going to try again next year and try and get it. And it's a 4-phase plan. The first phase is education and awareness. So we have a trailer, it's called the Oracle trailer, that we take out to the county fair or any festivals. We've been to schools and town halls, and it's a mock bedroom and bathroom, and it shows people the telltale signs of someone that has an addiction. And then we do Narcan training, and then we give them resources of who to call if they have an issue or a problem. Anything from People's Inc. or Samadhi or Catholic Charities, because they're all our partners. And so we tell them where they can go. Well, the biggest issue that most people talk about is insurance. And so we tell them who to speak to in regards to insurance, to sending people to rehab. And yes, it's going to take some time. No one is going to quit overnight. But if we don't do anything, we're going to have a lot of dead bodies throughout the county. Like I said, we were number 2 in the state. That needs to change, and because what we're doing isn't working. And that's phase 1. Phase 2, I talked about setting up the 1-800 hotline and sending teams out. Phase 3, ironically, today at 10:59, we actually started at 11 o'clock because I had a big our process is not in place for phase 3, and that's the medical assistant treatment program. We have been assisting and giving females that were pregnant because they can't go through withdrawal because it'll affect the fetus. So we have been bringing methadone and Suboxone into the jail in regards to pregnant females. But today we had one that was a previous pregnant female, and the prescription's done by the clinic, so it's not paid by the taxpayers, by us anyway. And do I have an actual budget for that? No. What we're doing is something that's unique and different, and it's about changing attitudes on addiction and the stigma that's associated with it. So eventually the way the program's going to look in the jail is that if they show up, and it's ironically, when I went up to Monroe County, and this was the different, when I asked the question, how do you know that someone is actually addicted? Well, they have to have a prescription from a doctor if they were on methadone, but you know when they start going through withdrawal. And when they start going through withdrawal, that's when we're going to ask them, you can, and it depends how long you're going to be. Remember, the jail is a short stay jail. It's not, you're going to be there 5 or 6 years or a year. Most folks stay there 2 to 3 weeks. And of course, that's going to change on 1 January because it's the bail reform. But if you want to be part of the MAP program, there's going to be certain criteria that you have to meet in order to become part of that program. And we're going to have a single pod, and we have a clinic in the jail. Prime Care runs it. It's a vendor. So we have mental health experts, doctors, we have regular doctors, and we have registered nurses that work there. And so when someone goes, and we call it medically assisted withdrawal. And so we don't call it detox because we're trying to kind of move away from that term detox because it makes it sound like somebody's suffering, and a lot of lawsuits are coming because of that. So having the program in place is going to be for anyone that wants to get help to kick the habit of being addicted to heroin. And so once they walk out the door, we're going to follow them for up to 1 year. And with our mental health, our peer advocates, our mental health experts, and we're going to partner up with Ellenville Hospital, who has a tremendous program, Kingston Hospital, Health Alliance, and our partners that have joined up. And they've been coming, we've been having meetings in preparation for this big move. Again, this is something that we've never done before, and a couple of counties in the state are doing it now, and we're looking at doing it here in Ulster County, and it'll probably be in place fully around January.
So is Ulster County Sheriff's Department the model of this program, or is this program pre-existing?
The office is probably the model for the Hudson Valley, but we have Albany County is already doing it. I went up there, and they're doing it. Monroe County is doing it. I know Dutchess County is thinking about doing it as well.
And I have one question for Chief Tinti. You said you need more cameras, more availability to see what's going on in the city. We have a lot of cameras within the city that are non-functional. They're in place, but they're not functioning. Like, I believe, right on the street where the incident occurred, you would have had a lot of information if they were working. What is the police department going to do to try to get those cameras, up and running? And 2, who monitors them? And how long are they, how long do you keep those tapes if they are monitored and they are kept?
So we don't have any cameras in the police department. Right, so we don't have cameras, anything that's monitored down at headquarters. We have our headquarters location, the city court facility, and then anything within, any place a prisoner or a defendant can go within our headquarters is monitored. Within the city, there were cameras installed back in 1999, 2000. That were at the time put into the Hodge Center. We had a small off-site office there. The systems needed a lot of maintenance. It's not like the technology that's out there today. We had one on the Fiden's rooftop, Fiden's appliance, and it would look down both sides of Broadway. It had a pin-tilt zoom. Back then, for 3 cameras and the capability to send that information to the Hodge was $25,000. Today, you can imagine how much you can get for that kind of money. But so we don't have that. We don't have the capability to monitor the cameras real time. So a lot of places what we've done to kind of help along with that, we've done video mapping within the city, and we have individuals, usually we go door to door, sometimes they'll send us an email, say, I have a camera in my front porch, or I have a camera in my backyard, and we'll collect that information. So the first thing is, when there is an incident, the officers, the detectives will look at it and say, well, let's check these places out first. Let's get there, knock on the door, and see if we can look at the camera footage. And sometimes that information changes, right? People, their cameras break, their system didn't record. A lot of it's deterrence. You know, that's part of the reason some of those cameras were still left up there, was as a visual deterrent, right? Oh, there's a you know, somebody that may not know thinks it's still on. But it has been problematic because there's really no upkeep for that technology, and the technology changes every day, right? So for, you know, whether it's the city or the county or the state to invest in all these camera systems, there's a maintenance issue. It's kind of like what we end up having with us, at least I can speak for Kingston, with the body cameras. You know, the idea to have information for the officers, for investigative purposes, for whatever it might be, even if it's for protecting the public or, you know, putting out the accountability and transparency part of it, that's great. What we did not expect at all was the amount of storage that we would need. We talked about, we said, we'll put in a couple of gigabytes, right? Now we're at terabytes. We can't keep up, because now essentially you're recording 4 hours, maybe 5 hours a day of an officer's actions. Multiply that by the number of officers on the street in a shift on a 24-hour, and then on top, and then the cameras themselves are running, the new ones that we're looking at are like 4K. That's, yeah, and that's the thing. Now we have to explore the possibility of having everything maintained off-site. But there was, back then when we started implementing it, there was the evidentiary value, who has access, is there editing capability? There was a lot of distrust on the community end of it, going, well, how do we know that footage isn't doctored, right? Now, obviously, there's software and stuff that protects all that, but certainly that was of a concern. Today, there's agencies still around us that don't have body cameras, that don't use body cameras. They either have dash cams or they don't have any cameras. You know, that for us as a municipal environment has been a challenge. And again, something that Mayor Noble recognized early on, let's get these things on. And it's been a struggle, right? You got to balance with everything else you're doing in the city and still try to give the police department what they need. So I am a big advocate for cameras. I think that's good. You got to balance the privacy issues anytime. Some of the new programs that are out there, I know in Jersey, they implemented a program 2 years ago, and amazingly, I don't know how they do it, the system is able to recognize when there's windows and doors and kind of X's everything out, and it's all done in the background. So, but it is amazing. I mean, there's talk about facial recognition out there for investigative purposes, and, you know, as you mentioned before about the data sets or the dots, or, you know, some looking at that information. You know, we're both signed on to the Hudson Valley Crime Analysis Center down in Orange County, and the information that's being funneled into that place is unbelievable. When you go down there, you look at this, it's within the emergency center.
It's amazing.
It's NASA. It's got the screens and everything's
Yeah,
moving, and they've got access to everything, including our information.
It's
So
amazing, it really is.
you see, like, you know, license plate readers, the LPR technology, when a car passes a certain intersection in certain places, not every intersection has them, but, you know, it records the car, you know, ABC 123. So if the vehicle has now been entered by our agency, ABC 123 was involved in, you know, a shooting or a child abduction, or when that car passes an LPR, it'll alert and say, it just went through this intersection. So just think about the capability now of law enforcement to say, we got to check that out. Or on the reverse end of it, now we say, well, something happened in this neighborhood, let's check. Now we say, well, wait a minute, you know, at 10 o'clock at night, this car came through this intersection twice in 3 minutes. Well, let's check out that one. So now we look at it. We can do certain searches, lawman searches, they call them, to kind of get this information. So the technology's there. It is difficult to balance that with the privacy sometimes, especially if you put it in neighborhoods and commercial, you know, but today, everybody has a camera, right? If you have a phone, 99% of the time you have a camera.
Basically, the phone is a computer, and there's so many things that you can do with it. But
That's
don't
true.
forget that you know, you talked about iCloud storage. That's very expensive too. That's super expensive. And we're kind of going through that too. That's a lot of money.
And the companies recognize that. And now, before it was like, oh, you could have unlimited, until they saw really the dollar amount. And again, it's a business, so you say, now it's per license. So every officer who has access to the system, camera and what, is charged a certain fee, right? And again, you know, I'll give them a lot of credit. The companies that are out there, whether it's WatchGuard or Axon or whatever, you know, they're the ones that have now seen why it's so important to have something that is a stable environment. And let me just say, from the Kingston police side of things, it has to be foolproof. It has to be, our copiers have big green buttons on them. Copy. That's what we want. And the same with the camera. It's got to be a simple button. When you download the information or upload it, just put it in the dock, it takes care of itself. Those are the things that have to be simplified, because if you're expecting a police officer under stress to do certain things, then you've got to train them to do those certain things over and over and over again. I use the analogy. The first time you get into a car as a young driver, you know, you're pulling up to that stop sign, and then you may take your eyes off that road to look down and put your foot from the accelerator onto that brake. The first time, you're like squeezing it, and you're trying to judge it, you're creaking the car. Fast forward 5 years, right? You got a soda, a hamburger, you're driving with your knee, you come up, a deer jumps in front of you, you hit the brake, you're not even looking at the pedal, right? You hit the brake, you look at it, runs away, you keep eating and drinking, and it's okay, right? So that changes as technology changes, but we keep introducing, like, remember our first dish camera, right? That's a big change.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to thank you for coming and sitting here for this length of time, being grilled for all these questions. I had one quick question.
Okay.
When I was discussing before with you, and I had the mic taken away from me because somebody else wanted to ask a question. All I wanted to know is your workforce at 100% employment?
Is the
Yes,
city
the
Kingston?
police department.
Yes, we're budgeted for 71, we have 71.
You have 100, you have 71
Yes.
employees. Are you supposed to have more or less?
Well, it's whatever's budgeted. So-
Whatever's budgeted?
Correct. There are 71.
There's no recommendations?
There are 71 positions.
Yes.
In the budget, and we have 71 positions filled.
Okay.
So there's no, I mean, we don't, at this point, I'll say it like this.
Could you
we don't have
use,
any-
can you use more
If
officers?
you could give me 200 more cops.
No, not 200.
Joe, can you give me 200 more cops?
Be realistic, you know, I mean.
No, and here's what I say right now. We are meeting the needs of the city. At 71 police officers, we're meeting the needs of the city. We're out there. Do people want a cop in every corner? Yes. Do
No.
they- Well, but they do, right? Would it be nice to have more police officers? In certain areas, yes. In certain areas, no. We don't need them, right? So when we had 80 cops, I'll go back to that high number,
Yeah,
right? And it was a
80
short
cops.
period of time when we had 80 cops. We had a lot tied up on community service. We had a few more detectives. Our investigative body was much larger. So that changed, right?
Was the crime rate less then?
The crime rate was more.
Was more?
The crime rate
Interesting.
was more.
Interesting.
Oh, when I started, I think we were hitting in the,
But now, you know what?
1400s.
I went to the budget meeting, and the mayor said he had, in the budget, he had room for 12 more employees that he could put on.
Okay.
With the surplus that he has in the budget. Perhaps we could get some officers out of that.
so the answer to that is, and I've always said, this is my saying, if you
Thank
give me
you.
more, I can do more, right? If you give me more, I can do more. More cops, more cars, more, give me a helicopter, I'll fly over the city, right? That kind of thing. But realistically, you have to look at that level with the mayor and how Mayor Noble services the entire city. He's responsible for overseeing DPW, the Kingston Police Department, KFD, the clerk's office, everything that's there. And really, I think if you look at that, right, I'm only responsible for overseeing the police. So when I look at that and say, I got 71 cops, here's what I think is the best way to service this city, to provide the best service we can. So I'm just gonna end it on, I know we're over the time, but we cannot do what we do if it wasn't for the sheriff's office. If it wasn't for our cooperation together, and I mean that sincerely, I really do, like, that helps. Well, but here's the thing, do the city residents bear that tax burden when now the county is able to provide us with more? No, listen, we had a Marine Patrol. Well, we had a Marine Patrol. Do we need a Marine Patrol? I was on the boat. I thought it was great. You've got two.
We have
And here's the thing, Sheriff, Sheriff, it's Jid. Right, we joke. Right, Sheriff, it's Jid, I need a boat. Boom, it's on the way. He doesn't even ask what it's for. It's on the way. The other day, could you spare an investment? It's on the way. That's what you need in order to service the community, because I have a responsibility for Kingston. He has a responsibility for the county, including Kingston. And that's why we get along.
Thank you.
Yeah, how we end up, right?
Good.
Thank you both very much. And I really love that you ended on that cooperative note. Thank you very much.
Thank you.